Red 1 cost the same to make as the mega flop Joker Folie à Deux, and it opened even lower in its opening weekend, and so it stands to reason that Red 1 must also be a mega flop, right? Not necessarily. Different rules apply to this Trump-era would-be blockbuster. Let's dive in. Before we get into the movie's budget and performance, let's begin with a brief, mild spoiler look at the movie itself. Red 1 falls right in line with other, more modern and very cool Christmas movies like 2022's Violent Night and 2020's Fat Man. Red 1 has that energy, only it's made for family audiences, though there is a buddy cop vibe that makes it particularly fun to the guys in the audience. The movie stars Dwayne Johnson as Santa Claus's chief of security, Santa Claus being portrayed by J.K. Simmons in The Shape of His Life. Even so, Santa Claus is kidnapped, forcing The Rock to work with Chris Evans, the hacker inadvertently responsible for Santa's kidnapping, to find out who actually kidnapped Santa, to what end, and to get him back in time for Christmas. If you enjoyed the TV series Grimm, you should have fun with this, as there are similar new spins on both Christmas and Yule mythology. Also, while completely coincidental, I find it funny that this movie came out just now, given the results of the recent election, because it just hits differently than it would have under a Kamala administration, even if the movie would have been exactly the same if the election had gone the other way. What I mean by that is that first and foremost, there is no wokeness in the movie, none whatsoever. Secondly, the movie has a very pro-social and extremely pro-family message. And finally, it has a pro-health message. How strong and fit Santa is part of the plot. Which is obviously because both Dwayne Johnson and Dani Garcia, his ex-wife but current agent and co-producer of this movie, are fitness enthusiasts. But again, that just hits differently with Robert Kennedy as part of the administration. Obviously, that has nothing to do with the movie itself. I just found the timing to be amusing. As for the movie itself, I had a lot of fun with it, and I thought it was very cool. But then again, I thought that of Black Adam as well, so keep that in mind. Your mileage may vary. With that, let's turn to the box office, which is a bit dicey. Red 1 cost more than $200 million to make, $250 million according to some reports, and opened to 30-some million at the domestic box office, which for those keeping score is even lower than Joker Folie à Deux, a movie which will go down in history as one of the all-time greatest flops. But there is more to the story than that. First and foremost, branding. The original Joker was already a billion-dollar movie, so when the sequel turned out to be so reviled that audiences worldwide positively recoiled from it, and it barely crossed the $200 million threshold worldwide in the end, just like Marvel's The Marvels before it, then that adds a level of infamy to the floppage. By contrast, Red 1 is a completely original property and a live-action Christmas movie at that, and there is a cap on those things. A 30-some million opening weekend is probably as high as such a movie was ever going to open, so by any conventional metric. The problem here isn't that the movie didn't open bigger, but that it cost too much to make. Make no mistake about it, making a vehicle starring The Rock is an expensive proposition, because it's not just him, it's his entire team, like the aforementioned Dani Garcia, and they all expect to be paid exceedingly well. So there is a major overhead before even a frame of footage has been filmed. This is why no regular studio has made a $200 million Christmas movie starring The Rock before. They all knew doing so would be financial, well, self-deletion. And indeed, no regular studio is behind this movie either. Whenever a $200 million plus would-be blockbuster opens in the 30-some million vicinity, that usually signifies a flop. But what changes the equation in this case is that the movie was made by Amazon for the streaming service Amazon Prime. It was scaled and budgeted for that. Any box office revenue is gravy on top. Let's see what Deadline Hollywood are saying in their analysis. Beginning with the reception and audience, they say, the movie's A- cinema score is better than Johnson's Black Adam and Skyscraper's B+, and the same as Rampage. The 88% on Rotten Tomatoes from audiences is the same as Black Adam. Comscore/Screen Engine audiences were harder with 78% positive, 57% definite recommend with kids under 12 better at 91%, and 51% must see right away. Best demos were 18 to 24 and over 55 at 20% apiece. Diversity demos were 48% Caucasian, 24% Latino and Hispanic, and oh wow, no more Latinx. Funny that, they used that up until very recently. But continuing, 12% Black, 11% Asian, and 5% NatAm/Other. But on the Amazon factor, Deadline Hollywood says, Red One is arguably the best opening for a movie hatched by a streamer, besting Apple's Killers of the Flower Moon, and it's in the vicinity of where Christmas live-action movies open. And before we continue, here we should note that the author of this article reportedly got angry emails from executives at the traditional studios, who were upset that Deadline Hollywood wouldn't label the movie as a flop, which they would have if it had come from one of the traditional studios. Now that you know that, the article continues. Now this is where the old studios of yore, even those with streaming services, can't handle the truth. And that is, any loss from Red One won't rock Amazon in the same way that it tips the entertainment content divisions of Lionsgate, Warner Brothers Discovery, Disney, etc. Amazon is a place where there's no stakes, says one industry source with knowledge of the nuts and bolts of the shopping site studio. Meaning failure doesn't hit them in the gut on a Monday morning the same way like it does for a studio in Universal City, Burbank, or on Melrose Avenue. Amazon claims that the benefits of Red One will be realized down the road in other ways. That's what they said about their $100 million pickup of Ben Affleck's Air, and we have yet to get the financial report from Amazon on the uptick in sales on Nikes, or the surge in sales in short tennis dresses from the Zendaya movie Challengers. Deadline Hollywood will tell you though, when Red One hits Prime, it will ultimately have ads sold against it, likely in its second window the following year. This past fall, Amazon MGM Studios started selling movies at MIP. Essentially, there's a downstream. Sources in the streaming sphere and SendMine the talent reps tells Deadline that despite the lackluster result here for Red One, it's a win for Amazon. Golly gosh, how? Well, this is a movie originally built for streaming, so its exorbitant costs were already accounted for by Amazon via the Prime service. Theatrical is gravy, and was the right move for Amazon MGM Studios to do. Theatrical launches have shown that movies have longer legs on streaming services. This point is an important one, and one that echoes one frequently made by my colleague Tom Connors. What they're saying here is that merely having a theatrical release, even if it is a limited one, adds further value to all later releases. This dates back to the prime days of VHS rentals, where if a movie was released in theaters, even in a limited capacity, this was enough to change the movie's profitability and therefore overall treatment. They could charge that little bit more, and the limited release acts as a way of marketing that normally is out of bounds for regular straight-to VHS or cable films, making it appear higher end and more valuable. In other words, while Red One, $200 million budget notwithstanding, in a sense is a glorified straight-to-video film like The Crow 3 or Hellraiser 9, having a theatrical release allows it to pass for a blockbuster, or a would-be blockbuster at any rate, which just makes it stand out so much more than any streaming-only movie ever could. And even if it could have been higher, this box office is kind of in line with not just how live-action Christmas movies generally perform, but with how the rock solo movies tend to perform. Remember, his biggest hits were all ensemble movies, while in solo outings, his biggest hits are Skyscraper, San Andreas and Black Adam, which this opening isn't that far away from. Returning to Deadline Hollywood, their analysis essentially concludes: success for Amazon, MGM, Netflix and Apple is defined differently from the traditional motion picture studios. And then they have a message for those traditional motion picture studios. Old guard, rather than snipe at rival studios like Amazon, let's deal with the fact that fewer people are going to the movies post-lockdowns. And in a new Trump era, the entertainment industry is competing with the outside world's perception of Hollywood and movies. Let's unpack that. Again, for the final version of this article, Deadline Hollywood were contacted by executives from other studios that were unhappy about Red One not being labeled a flop, which any of their movies would have been if they had cost as much and opened to as little. And here, Deadline Hollywood, in not so many words, told them to get with the program, because Amazon has a different model, and for as long as their main business is printing money, then Amazon plays by different rules in the movie space. The implication here, at least as I read it, is that Hollywood is now in a new world and a new era, the Trump era. It's an era where they suddenly have to give the audience what the audience wants, because the traditional Hollywood studios needs the audience to flock to their movies in a way that Amazon simply doesn't. And Amazon isn't going anywhere, so Hollywood is going to have to adapt. And what they have to adapt to is the audience. Because as even Deadline Hollywood stated, we're in the Trump era now. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments.